The UK's opposition Labour Party is preparing to vote down any deal with the EU that Theresa May brings to Parliament. Shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer also says the option of Remain is not ruled out in the event of a second referendum. Keir Starmer joins us now from Labour's conference in Liverpool. Very good to have you with us, Keir, this morning. So you've said you'll vote against Theresa May. You've said you'll vote against her plans. How sure can you be that you'll have the numbers, that you'll be able to make that work? Where will the rebels outside the Labour Party come from?
Yeah, I mean, the position on the deal is, I think that everybody is now worried that we're going to get a very bad deal or even no deal. I set out a number of tests at the beginning of the exercise. I said these are the tests that we'll apply to whatever you bring back, Prime Minister, and if you don't meet them, we'll vote against it. Now, at the time, the Prime Minister said, I'm determined to meet your tests. But things have gone very wrong, and what we're indicating today is that she's not on course to meet our tests, and if she doesn't meet our tests, we're going to vote against any deal she brings back. Of course, there's still a prospect that she may not even reach agreement, which would be even worse. But we're making it clear that we set these tests, we set these conditions at the beginning of the exercise, and we're going to apply them to what comes back.
So if you vote against her deal, Keir, there's a risk that then we end up with no deal, of course. Are you prepared, is the Labour Party prepared to take that risk?
Well, I don't think that this idea that the Labour Party's got to vote for whatever the Theresa May cobbles together, or something worse, is the right way to look at it, because that's completely meaningless. To say to the opposition, well, you can have a vote, but if you don't vote for me, you're getting something much worse. That's not meaningful. So what we've said is, if the deal is voted down, or she doesn't reach a deal, there ought to be a general election, because it would be a complete breakdown and failure of the negotiating strategy. And in an ordinary world, that would happen. These are, after all, the most important negotiations since the Second World War, and if you've failed in them, you ought to go. But if that doesn't happen, there must be other options, because we shouldn't go to no deal, because that would be catastrophic. And what we say is other options must be open, and one of those is a public vote. So it's a sequenced, structured, common sense approach to the decisions we know we're going to have to make over the next few weeks and months.
How will you get Theresa May, though, to another election, Keir, if that's the preferred route of the Labour Party? Because the rebels within her party could be galvanised by the prospect of another vote. I mean, no confidence votes don't work very often, do they? What, 1979 and the 1920s?
Yes, I accept that. We don't know the situation that we're going to be in. It would be unprincipled, really, for the Conservatives trying to cling on just because they can. But I accept we don't know the circumstances that we're going to find ourselves in, which is why today, in the motion that we're going to have before conference, which is a motion that we are all united behind, we say, in the event of no general election, then other options need to remain open. That's precisely why I've done a sort of 3 steps. First is vote on the deal. The second is the general election situation. And the third is what happens if a third step is needed and other options are needed. And that's where the option of a public vote becomes important. So it's sort of setting out our strategy, setting out our thinking, but recognising that we don't at the moment know quite what is going to happen in the next few weeks and months, because frankly these negotiations are going so badly that I think if you asked anyone around the country what they think is going to happen, people would say, I really don't know. I wasn't expecting it to be this chaotic.
So a little more on the third stage there. You say that's when other options might need to be discussed.
Yeah.
Would that be when you've put aside the idea of a general election and dismissed that is possible? When is that likely to be, Keir? When is the last point at which a general election would make sense for you? You put it to one side, you move on, and you start talking about other options. Well,
these decisions and events are going to come, I think, quite rapidly through the autumn. There are unknowns. It was initially anticipated that the deal, if there is one, was going to be reached in October. Now there's talk that might be November. So we're not in control of the timetable as the opposition. We're going to have to wait and see what the Prime Minister brings back and when she does. If it goes to November, or even December, that knocks it back. But the sequencing, I think, is clear, and I recognise that once the decisions fall to be made, they may come in pretty rapid order, and that's why it's important for us to set out what we're going to do at each stage. But as to the timetabling, that is not in our hands, and it looks as though the October deadline may be missed. If it is missed, that pushes everything back another month. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens in October at that EU summit.
Would there be any point, Keir, in having a second referendum, a second question being asked of the electorate, if it was just about the deal on the table? Because that's what John McDonnell told me yesterday, that it's just going to be about the deal on the table from Theresa May and not about whether we remain or leave. Would it make any sense to have another vote if Remain is not on the ticket?
Well, the motion that's being put to party conference today was drafted by the best part of 300 delegates on Sunday night. Took about 6 hours, and I was in the room. And there was a deliberate decision not to be prescriptive and not to rule anything out and not to rule Remain out as an option, because we don't know the circumstance we're going to find ourselves in. We don't even know, of course, whether there'll be a deal to argue about or no deal. So we have to cover the bases. But the motion today is not ruling anything out and not ruling out Remain as an option. But we're going to have to wait and see what situation we're actually confronted with, either later in the year or in the early part of next year.
So not ruling out anything, but can't rule it in just yet, I suppose. So if there is to be another election, then, Keir... feel free to comment. Is it to... Can you rule it in? Can you rule it in, Remain as an option? I just missed half...
well, what we're saying is... we don't know what the question will be. We're ruling nothing out, and therefore not ruling out Remain. But at the moment, we obviously don't know the circumstances. Are we going to have a deal to argue about or no deal? We also need to recognise that we will still be the opposition at that stage, and therefore the question of what the question will be is something that's going to have to be decided and debated across Parliament as a whole. So we're being realistic about this, but we are certainly not ruling out Remain as an option. We will have to confront that question when we get to it, knowing the circumstances that we're in. As I say, a fundamental question is there going to be a deal to argue about or not? And until we know that, you can't really begin to start framing the question.
Will you and the Labour Party leadership ever be able to come to an agreement on whether Remain should be on... I appreciate you just said it's too early to say what the question should be, but you and the party leadership seem to be on different pages on this.
No. Listen, we're debating this morning. The motion is clear in its intention, and I am confident that this motion will go through with a united Labour Party position. Now, I know there have been different views across the party. Of course there have. Brexit elicits different views across all parties. But the fact that on Tuesday of conference, the Labour Party is able to pass a motion drafted by consensus around which we're all united is an incredible achievement, and we're all behind it. And I look forward to sort of fast-forwarding to about this time next week to see whether by Tuesday at the Tory party conference they're anywhere near agreeing a proposition which all of them will then get behind. So, of course, the difference is opinion. I don't pretend otherwise. But the fact we're doing something today which is actually to bring it all together and have a motion that will be supported across the party, and that is a considerable achievement.